In the early 1990s, the infamous Fab Five swept the nation. Five youngsters, donned in the iconic maize and blue of Michigan University, captured America's hearts and minds and the pocketbooks of TV syndications alike. Unfortunately, before their run in March of that year, their star player told a sad anecdote in front of the camera. After a game, he walked into the student bookstore, gazing up to where his jersey would be selling if it hadn't sold out, realizing that he wouldn't be able to afford it himself. If that doesn't expose the disconnect the NCAA has created, I'm not sure what else will. These players are not amateurs, and it's time to reflect it as such. The NCAA needs to pay college athletes. Now, you might look at me and say this is crazy. These players do get paid. They have college scholarships. They don't have to pay for rent. In a sense that you're right, but they're not getting a fair share of the pie. They're generating millions of dollars in revenue for big companies, creating jobs for local people, bringing money into communities, and if they were paid, it would be even bigger, creating more jobs, more sustainability, and more help for these communities. Now, if you look at it the way I do, you realize how much of an impact this will make. The wealth and creation for these communities and for these schools will not only continue, it will improve. Now, me, I'm just a guy who likes sports who wants to work in it one day. But I've found several doctors and lawyers that agree and have statistics to prove it. I have 3 points. 1, they are not amateurs. 2, there is a conflict of interest. And 3, the risk now outweighs the reward. Now, again, athletes are not amateurs. The Webster's definition of amateurism is somebody who does not get paid for what they do. Now, in a sense that works, but in my mind, it's somebody who doesn't do something at a professional level. When I tune in and watch Alabama play Clemson in the college football championship, by no means do I look at that as an amateur event. Amateurism to me is a father and a son playing golf at a municipal golf course, or 2 buddies going to a bowling alley after work. Not somebody being sponsored by billion-dollar companies on ABC on a Saturday night. Now, according to attorney Edward Grimmett, the NCAA bylaws are written to perpetuate this misnomer. Essentially, they're using this poor definition to continue what they believe is right. This picture behind me is a perfect encapsulation of that. College athlete bound by the shackles of a big company. Now, again, it's a perfect metaphor, but it doesn't do it justice. It's time for a change. Now, as I said, the conflict of interest is created here because the NCAA is the one creating the rules and upholding them. The NCAA just last year created just south of $1 billion in revenue. Now, if you look at this from a bigger perspective, you'll notice it penetrates every aspect of society. University of Missouri, for example, according to the Journal of Missouri Bar, generated $107 million in revenue in 2018. One school. $100 million for one small town. Why isn't it being distributed? Why is it sitting at the top? If you look at this picture behind me, you'll notice the average revenue by sport created yearly by the 127 FBS schools. Of course, at the top you'll find football at $31 million, but even all the way down at the bottom, college softball generating $700,000 a year. The problem here is there is massive revenue being generated and not being shared with the people that create it. It's an issue that needs to be addressed. And not only is it a problem of sharing the wealth, it's a problem of antitrust. The NCAA itself is a monopoly. Now, that isn't just the problem here, it's the tip of the iceberg. The problem is they won't let it change. In 2015, the brilliant kids of Northwestern football tried to unionize. Escalated all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, where it was barely shot down. Now, what came of this was the NIL, or allowing players to make money off their own name, image, and likeness. But all this is giving peas to somebody who needs a full meal. It's throwing shekels at somebody who deserves far more. And it's the NCAA, further again, creating a conflict of interest and just pushing the envelope. Now, as we segue from the fact that it is a conflict of interest, we need to look at it from the player's perspective, where the risk is no longer better than the reward. Again, you might tell me they've got enough. They've got scholarships. Well, I've shown you how much money and revenue is generated by these players and how it's not proportionally given back. One thing to keep in mind is risking life and limb with this money. Between 2009 and 2010, 1 million documented serious injuries were reported. Now, serious injuries is subjective, but it's far greater than anything from a scratch to, say, a hyperextended knee. But it's a documented injury, so these kids, 10% of which will have the ability to pursue professional careers, are risking bodily harm to pursue something that they are creating money for that they're not being given back to. I don't see how that's not a problem, and it has to change. Tim Nevius, a sports attorney, gave a speech at a TED Talk saying something that I thought was very profound. We make multimillionaires out of the coaches, but refuse to pay the players. Now, if you look at this picture here, everything in yellow is a football coach. Everything in orange is a basketball coach. That green one up there is a hockey coach. And the 9 out of 50 are non-college coaches. These are the highest paid public employees by state. Again, massive problem. You're talking about $5 million plus for every single person in yellow or orange, yet we can't afford to pay a player a living wage. I just don't see how that makes sense. Now, to conclude, tie back to my first point, I'd like to tell another sad anecdote. After winning the national championship in 2015 for the University of Connecticut, star point guard Shabazz Napier said he didn't know where he was going to eat that night. It might seem hyperbolic, but because of NCAA sanctions, he's not allowed to be bought food, or gifts as they call it. So after generating almost $9 million in revenue in a single night for a public institution monitored by a non-profit organization, he wasn't sure what he was going to eat until breakfast the next day. That doesn't seem like America to me. That doesn't seem like a free world. It seems like somebody blocked and locked in place, and it needs to change. It might not seem like you have a lot to do, but social media is a powerful tool. Go on Twitter, go on Facebook, write a letter to a local politician. Do something to show that you want people to be fairly treated. This supersedes just sport. It's fair treatment of people who work hard and are disenfranchised, and it absolutely has to change. I will end on a quote from a profound and powerful man by the name of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, activist and athlete. Common decency demands that the NCAA pay its athletes, but the only way it will happen is the same way workers got paid throughout American history, through a strong union. Thank you very much.